All right, welcome everybody. Thanks for attending. If anybody's heard me speak before, you know I'm really passionate about Groovy and what it can do. So in this session, we're going to talk about all the things, or at least some of the things that you may not know that Groovy can do. And what I really want, the biggest goal I want to get out of this session is for you guys to get really excited about what's possible. And I want you to understand that if you don't learn this and don't start using it, I don't know that you'll be relevant in 5 years from now. It's that powerful. And lastly, to educate you just a little bit. And one more thing, I know there's a lot of competition out there and a lot of talk about OneStream and Anaplan. And I think without thinking about Groovy and how it can impact the architecture of an application, you're not taking the full breadth of the application and not really comparing apples to apples when you're comparing OneStream to Anaplan. So if you're in competes with OneStream and Anaplan, make sure that you understand what Groovy can do. So the roadmap today, I'm going to go really fast through this stuff. So it's going to be blinding speed, but we're going to do some introductions. And then I'm going to talk about some things that you may know and some things that you may not know about Groovy. Some of the crazy stuff that you can do that hopefully will get you excited, and how the technology impacts the planners, which I think is something that is overlooked in a lot of evaluations on whether you use Groovy or not. And then lastly, how to get started and why it's so important to learn Groovy the right way so that you can code this stuff effectively. A little bit about me. I'm not going to talk much about this because nobody really cares, but the big thing is that I want you guys to understand that my background, if you look at the left, I've been an adjunct professor. I've done stock valuations. I've been accounting, finance, and I've supported finance and accounting and then went into consulting. My IT background in trading is nothing. It's null, it's pound missing. So if I can do this stuff and I can figure it out with nobody blogging about it, with no education, there's no reason that you guys can't figure this out and become productive with it in a relatively quick manner. And that's really what I want you guys to get out of this slide. So what you may have heard are that it makes things better, and it does. It makes things faster, and it does. It can do some really cool pre-save validation, and it does. Runtime prompts can be validated, which is another great thing that it can do. But what you may not have heard is how flexible it can be. You may not have heard that it will improve processes sometimes up to 99% faster than what they are right now. Data can be validated in ways that you probably have no idea in a pre-save fashion, which I'm going to show you some examples. The runtime prompts can be validated. And again, you can use regular expressions. You can do it in ways that you never could before. And then there's REST API and how you can interact with the REST API. And the demo application that I usually build, or that I usually use when I do training or when I'm showing you examples, most of it comes from the Best Buy website and uses the API. So I have a calculation that builds all my metadata. It refreshes all the stores. It refreshes all of the products, the product types, the prices, the sale prices, how many open box items are in there. So I load data from there as well. There's no EPM automate. There's no other functionality. It's all in a calc script. So some of the things that we can do, like I said, that most people may not know is dimensionality. We can remove dimensions, add dimensions. You can convert data when you're moving data back and forth. With metadata, you can add, remove, and update members, which is, in my opinion, really overlooked because of some of the functionality that you can actually give the users to manage some of the exceptions that you typically are calling them and asking them what you want to do with something. So you have full control over the data manipulations when you're pulling data from other sources. And by the way, those other sources can be bestbuy.com, amazon.com, target.com. You can pull from internal relational databases. Any REST-enabled source you can pull from. So what's the significance of a lot of this? And this is something that a lot of us don't really think about. And I have, again, a passion for this because I was in finance and I know how difficult it can be. But what Groovy can do is it can make things faster. I mean, it can give me immediate consolidated reporting. And if you've ever been in finance, you know the CFOs want answers to things all day long that you typically don't have answers for. And if you need to make a change to your balances or your expenses, and you need to report at a consolidated level, sometimes that takes, you know, an hour to produce that. Well, with Groovy, everything is in real time, so that no longer is an issue. Data entry validation. So there's less data validation that has to be done by like the line of business controllers and the corporate entities, because the data that gets fed to them is often a lot more right if you do data validation. And the awesome thing about data validation is that it happens before the data gets to the database. So it's not like in the old times when you might use @return and throw a message that says, hey, you've put in rates, but your allocations total 110%. So you've over allocated something and you need to fix that, and then hope that they fix it. We can stop them from entering the wrong data altogether, which makes the data so much better and so much easier to manage, especially when you've got 200 planners and they're all entering data. Some of them are better than others, and you always have issues. And trust me, on the finance side, when you're in that situation, you're at the end of the month, when you're trying to finalize a forecast, you're always there until 2, 3 in the morning because people mess that stuff up. So it's a great selling point to talk to your clients and your customers about the fact that you can really make a big difference. And it's more self-service and far less dependent on administrators. So there's a lot of things that you can do now in calculations that you couldn't do before. So what does this mean to application support? If it's not obvious, you're obviously going to get fewer requests for help because it's going to be more self-service. You're going to get fewer issues where someone says there's an issue when it's really a training issue. Because the other thing about, say, pre-save form validations, it not only tells them that the data that they've entered is wrong, but it also educates them to what it should be so that they don't make that issue or don't make that mistake nearly as often. And it trains them. So you get less questions on why they think something is broken and it isn't. There's better communication. You can send emails. Imagine sending an email when a long process runs. Imagine sending application support an email when a calculation fails that a user's run on a form. And you can be a lot more proactive that way. The performance has obviously improved. Everybody knows that. Automatic issue resolution. Again, you can have these pre-save validations. You can look at the error logs when the data loads now, and you can automatically update the metadata based on a missing product or a missing account. So there's a lot of things that you can proactively do to fix things before you even get into the office in the morning on a process that runs at night. And there's less time spent automating tasks. There's fewer technologies required because so much more can be done inside of a calculation. You don't need EPM automate nearly as much. You may not even need an external server to run that type of stuff. If you can go directly to the source to pull the data, you don't need to be moving files back and forth. And fewer people, less time to support the application. Obviously, there's a cost improvement there. So we're going to go through some of the examples on some of the things, again, that you may not know. And I'm going to show examples. I'm going to walk through examples and videos of most of the examples. So I'm going to talk about the benefits. I'm going to discuss the impacts to the users and the administrators. Like I said, we're going to review some real world examples, and here we go. But it shouldn't go without said, all of these things create lower cost of ownership. They all create a better experience for the users and the administrators. There's obviously less effort for the administrators, and there's less dependency on the admins to perform tasks like fixing things when somebody messes something up. There's less scripting, less automation that needs done. There's faster performance. And there's a lot fewer data errors, which makes the planners much more accountable to the data that they enter. And it also makes the forecasting and budgeting a lot more accurate so that you don't have to go with your tail between the legs to back to the street and say that you messed something up. And faster and improved decision-making happens because everything is in real time. And when I mean real time, what I mean is You can have an application that is a workforce application, a product application, a CapEx application, and they all roll to a financial application in total. But they all have different dimensionality. They have different account structures. And when you save a form, that data automatically gets consolidated and pushed over in real time. So by the time somebody can go over and run a report in the finance cube, all of the data, whether it's changing one person from union A to union B, it's all updated in the finance cube and consolidated. So advanced pre-save validation. Some of this is probably very obvious, but it ensures the allocations. And an example with allocations, you can ensure that allocations are done at 100%. Text-based input adheres to specific rules. So let's say that you want to transfer an employee and you have the person, I don't know, freeform the cost center that they want to move them to instead of a drop down or something like that. You can make sure that that cost center that they enter, make sure it exists in the application and the metadata. You can require email formatting. You can require phone numbers. You know, if somebody wants to add new products for a budgeting process, you can require that it starts with P and then it has 6 numbers, and that member doesn't exist yet in the outline. So there's all kinds of things that you can do. And you can also manage thresholds, and these thresholds can be managed by the users, but you can allow overrides. You can force rates to be entered when volumes exist. So how many times have maybe you done it yourself or had somebody come in and say the data's not right and somebody entered 1 million units, but no cost or no price for those units. So it never calculated any cost to revenue. Those types of things you can stop before the person moves on. So again, the planner and the administrator impact, the data inputs resolved before there's ever an issue. You get faster corporate finalization of results, and planners have a lot more ownership, and they don't have to rely on administrators to fix the problems that they introduce, because most of the time they're not introduced at all. And a lot of the rules can be managed by planners with overrides that allow, that are allowed without an administrator doing that. And what I mean is, you can say, in the example that I'm going to show here, you'll see that I enter a 10%, or it's 10%. I change it to 30%, 40%, 50%. And I have a rule in here that it says it can't be above 40%. So I get a validation error, or I think it's 30%. So I have to change that to meet that criteria. So it tells me in the rule that I've validated or I've entered the wrong data. But notice here, if I put in a comment and I explain why I go over that threshold, and I add that comment to the specific cell, and then I try to save it, it now allows me to enter the 50%. So let's say it's a new iPhone and your margin's going to be higher on cases or something like that. You basically manage these thresholds, but there are times when you want users to go above them. And if they go above them, they have to enter an explanation for it. So these are some of the crazy things that you can do to really make these processes better. So real-time data synchronization. I talked about this, and I think everybody, you know, wants this and wanted it years ago. But you can synchronize planning and strategic modeling. You can synchronize data between applications. I just recently did an implementation where a client had workforce in a different environment, in a different pod, because of the security, which is all something we're familiar with. But when they wanted that data saved, they wanted it consolidated and moved over to the finance cube in real time. So we were able to do that. You can't use data maps and things like that, but you can use the REST API with Groovy, and you can map accounts to, you know, the accounts that were in workforce to the GL accounts and all that kind of stuff. So you can do all that stuff in real time. ASO to BSO, BSO to ASO, all of those things, there's no limits like you have in the data maps. And this can be done on any REST enabled source. So we could push this data to a relational database on-prem if we wanted to, when the person saves the data. So there's really nothing that stops us from moving data between really any source and destination that we really want to. Real-time consolidations, obviously for administrators, that makes a huge difference because you don't have to run calculations hourly or whatever. The decision-making is faster, fewer calculations to maintain and build, which is a huge, something that's huge that people overlook, and fewer administrative functions. So you have to have less of a staff that has to own those applications. And there are a lot more points of failure that don't exist, or a lot fewer points of failure rather. So this top-down synchronization, this example, and this is a dashboard, and I don't typically do these in dashboards, but it helps with the demonstration. So in this example, I'm going to put some overrides for the unit dollars and for the growth rates. And what's impressive about this is when I do this, it runs the calculation in a product cube. It pushes that data from that product cube to 4 other databases, 4 other plan types. And you'll notice when I save this, that's how quick it was. So that is something we've never had before. So when I talk about improvement, it is lightning fast because we can change the methods of how we move that data to and from different applications. And we can isolate it on a much smaller set of data. And it just makes things tons better. So it gives us functionality that we've never really had before. Real-time interaction with data. A ton of things here. So we can react to data in metadata load errors. Like I said before, you know, if you go back to the on-prem days and you had a data load that failed, you would get an error log. Well, just recently that was introduced. So now we can throw an error log to the inbox. We can open up that error log. We can figure out why it rejected, and we can add metadata so that it doesn't reject, refresh the cube, and then reload the data or the error file, just like kind of what we would do on-prem with Maxell. So tons of things like that that we can do. Data and metadata loads can be produced from error files. So a calculation now can update metadata and data as well. Dynamically add and update metadata. So huge functions there. You can have a calculation that actually changes the metadata, which is awesome. What that translates into is less downtime for nightly processes, more accurate data for reporting, and the maintenance is very dynamic, and there's less ownership of metadata and less dependent on other sources. Also, you have automatic error correction. So when you have an error at night, it would correct itself. And when you come in the morning at 8 o'clock, it's already fixed. Again, all of these things I'm talking about can be done in a business rule. So interacting with external sources. I've talked about this already, but think about some of the possibilities that we have with interacting with external sources. Think about loading exchange rates. Now, is that a huge deal? No, but how many times did somebody forget to update it? How many times did somebody update it with the wrong rates? And I'm just using rates as an example. So this is something that could run throughout the day to update the daily exchange rates if they were important enough, or they could run at night, or they could run monthly. And it's just one less thing that the application owners need to worry about. You can retrieve driver-based information or industry data from external sources. So now this is a stretch, but think about this. Let's say I am a planner at Logitech and I want to do less work. What if I built a calculation that went out and connected to Best Buy to see if any of my products were on sale? And if they were on sale, then I wanted to increase my forecast for the month by, I don't know, 2% if Best Buy had it on sale. And if Amazon had them on sale, I wanted to increase them by 7%. If, some other Target, whatever, you can go out and automatically pull that information. So a lot of the research and the effort can be done automatically now. Think about this. Again, we'll go with mice, and I'm working for Logitech. What if I go out and query every Best Buy store to see how many open box items exist for the mice that I sell? Maybe that's an indicator of they don't work well. Maybe it's an indicator that people don't like them. maybe it's an indicator that your price is too high. But when you have a threshold maybe of, you know, I don't know, 10 per store or something like that, you could expect that your forecast should be dropped because you're not going to make the revenue because of the revenue or of the sales. There, a lot of them are getting returned. So again, this is kind of out there, and I don't know in the real world if this would actually make sense to do. But when you think about the possibilities, it's crazy. Think about if, I don't know, you were selling jerseys and you could go out and get, you know, player statistics real time for Major League Baseball. And if certain players were doing well, you knew that, I don't know, your sales would go up. We talked about the open box items for Best Buy and importing the pricing from Amazon and Best Buy as well. So think about if you went out and retrieved the weather for the next 7 days and the weather was a factor for you. And I don't imagine many mom and pop restaurants have, you know, have this kind of technology, but let's say you're Olive Garden and you go out and you look at all the areas that your stores exist in. And if the forecast for the weather is going to be bad for the next 7 days, maybe it impacts negatively people coming in. Obviously, let's exclude COVID. So if that's a factor, maybe you can just automatically have a calc go out, pull in the weather forecast, whether it's going to rain or snow or be cold, and you can automatically drop your forecast for food sales for the areas that are bad. And obviously, you know, if the weather's going to be great, maybe you bump them up a little bit. So all those things could be automated. Importing data from from external sources. Like I said before, I mean, the demo app that I have is basically a full blown out model of Best Buy, and it comes from a calculation that goes out and pulls in products and stores, prices, sale prices, the types of stores, department hierarchies, the type of product and how they roll up in the product hierarchy. All that's built from a calculation. Again, I use MLB as an example, or the NFL or whatever. You know, you can go out and automatically pull that stuff in every night if you wanted to create your own, you know, application that had MLB stats. Obviously, the response and the functionality is better and quicker across pretty much everything. And when you can pull in weather and it automatically changes your forecast, obviously your decision making, or you can spend a lot more of your time analyzing the numbers rather than trying to figure out what they're going to be. Automation is all accessed in the cloud, which is a huge thing for consultants like me. I don't have to go through a VPN to connect to the client's on-prem, you know, servers. I can actually just run everything in ACCOU, which is wonderful for me. It's one less thing I have to worry about. There's fewer technologies to know. So if you use Groovy and you automate some of this stuff in calculations, you know, there's less of a need for Perl or PowerShell or DOS or, you know, whatever to wrap your calls in EPM Automate to do air trapping and things like that. So there's just a lot less information that you really have to be an expert at. The development cycles are a lot quicker, especially for consultants, because you're going to take exactly what you did before and you're going to drop it at the next client, especially on a lot of these administrative type functions. Interacting with smart list labels. This is something that we could never do before. You know, Essbase stores the number of the smart list index, and the smart list label sometimes can be very important, especially now that we can actually connect or create a smart list based off of a dimension. So you think about the benefits of this, and I'm going to show an example on this one specifically, where how many times do you do a workforce app, especially with the, you know, with the workforce module, and people want to be able to transfer 10 of their people. They don't want to have to right click and transfer each one individually. They just want to do it in one shot. I'm going to show you an example that does that. Seeding data faster. If I want to, if I have a new product and I want to see the trends based off of another product, yeah, you could do it with a runtime prompt, but let's say that I have 10 or 15 that I want to do at once and I don't want to run the rule 10 times. I can have a form that has a list of the products and then the new product that I want to seed or the product that I want to seed from. And then the logic would go through and loop through the form that they entered this information from, dynamically build the Essbase calcs and do that in one step. Self-initiating entity and product closures. This is a big one, and something that I'm actually working on right now is we don't want to delete any of the entities or products because they could have historical data in them and they don't come in the metadata product. Well, what happens if you moved all of those products that weren't in the metadata file that we get to a member called, I don't know, unknown products? And then you had a form for the users to be able to look at those unknown products, and you had some options. You could say, I want to merge this product with another product. So you could have a drop-down list, a smart list that's connected to the product dimension, and you can have them pick the products they want to merge it with, and then they click save and it merges those products, and then it deletes the product from the hierarchy. Imagine all of the things like that that an administrator has to do. And if you're on the user side, you don't like to wait. And if you're on the administrator side, you don't want to do it because it's all custom logic and one-off stuff. This really reduces the amount of errors because a lot of that stuff is done manually. There's a lot less effort. Again, a lot better options for users because they can do it themselves. Less support is needed, less training is needed. And it's a lot more user-friendly for the users, again, because they can do it themselves. So if you look at this example, I have a list of products and I want to merge these products with another store. So I go in and I have a drop-down or a smart list that's connected to the store hierarchy. And all I'm doing is selecting the stores that I want to merge with other stores. And I'm selecting the right store. So I can do this in one step. Now, there's a lot of things I can add to this. So if I save it, it would run the calculations to actually do this. There's a lot of things that I can do with this. I can validate that the to and the from aren't the same. I can validate that I'm not merging more than one or more than one to one other store. I mean, there's just anything that you really want to do from a validation perspective, you can do. You could have a pop-up box that says, are you sure you want to delete these when you're done? So there's all kinds of things. And obviously, if you had to do this very often, this is a lot easier than right-clicking and doing it, 10, 15, 20 times. So it just adds a lot of value and it makes the experience a lot better. Managing metadata. And this is another one that I think people are really surprised at. I actually showed some work that I did to a new consultant on the project that I'm on right now. And I walked through some of the calculations and he was just like, oh my gosh, I never even thought of doing some of this stuff. So just seeing it, I'm just thinking about the last 10 clients I had and thinking, man, if I could have done that to the last 10 clients, how better it would have been. So there's all kinds of awesome things that you can do with managing metadata. And I'll show you an example of one. But you have access to all the properties, so you can add, delete, edit, anything. Querying metadata is another thing. How many times do you have, rule-based logic that says, I don't know, if the product has more than 10 characters in it, or if it's in East region, then my rate's a little bit higher. If it's in the Southern region, my rate's a little bit lower. So all of those things can be done when you run a calculation. You can query that metadata and use that to build your logic. You can do custom form validations, custom calculations, and then you can, build and maintain metadata in business rules, like I said. So there's no EPM automate type of process, or back in the day, Maxell. I mean, you can run, like I said, a calculation that does all of this. So it's all in the cloud, which is really, really nice. Calculations are faster. And one thing I want to kind of squash is I get this question a lot. How does Groovy make Essbase faster? So the reality is it doesn't make Essbase faster. If I dynamically create a calculation and run it, and I hard code that calculation and run it, it's going to be exactly the same. But what I can do is I can isolate my logic to a much smaller set of data. So if you think about somebody that's updating product properties or product revenue, and they have 2,000 or 3,000 products on the form, and they go in and they only change 2 of them. What we've always done in the past is you create runtime prompts, and then those get filled from the point of view, but the rows and the columns, it pretty much just does level member 0 or at relative or whatever, and it runs the calculation on every single member in that dimension. Well, now what we can do is we can effectively fix on only the rows and columns that are edited. So you're running the data on a much smaller subset of what you typically would run it on. And it's not just calculations, by the way. You're moving data from ASO or BSO to ASO. That can be as isolated to a very, just what's edited. So that's a smaller subset. So you think about the whole path of what happens after somebody saves data, calculations, data movement, consolidations, all of that stuff can be isolated down to only what they edit. And that's really the benefit and what makes everything faster. So again, it's kind of Groundhog Day here, but less effort for the administrators. There's a lot more functionality that we can build in a calculation, and it's a lot less effort. There's fewer ad hoc requests, user-owned and user-enabled processes. So everybody wins here. And so this is an example, and welcome to hybrid, right? We have hybrid now. And so let's say that we don't know exactly how much we're going to consolidate in our dimension because we don't know the speed of it. But we don't want to have to keep going back to IT and saying, hey, can you make it so that any level 0 is stored and any parent is dynamic, or any level 0 and 1 is stored and dynamic? Because going back to IT to request that stuff, especially after you get into prod, it's change orders and it's a pain. So what if you just did that all on your own? So this is just an example, and I'm not going to teach you guys Groovy right now with this, but if you just look at this first line, I'm getting a list of all of the products. So the descendants of product. The next item, I'm just setting a variable to the level 0 members of the product. And there's a get evaluated members, and I just put I level 0 descendants. So now I have a list of all the products and a list of just the level 0 products. And then you can see products.each, I loop through each one of the products. The next line, this member props, I get all of the properties. That function is IT2map. That gives me every single property and all the property values. And then I check, is that product in the level 0 products list? Meaning, is it a level 0? If it is, I want to change the data storage property to whatever cube I'm on that I'm running this rule to never share. Otherwise, I want to change that property to dynamic calc. And then I save that member. Now I have to do a refresh. So it's not something that you want to put on a form for users to do this and expect immediate results. But in a nightly process, after I upload my metadata, I run this, and now I have complete control over what's dynamic and what's not. So if my performance starts to suffer because my hierarchy is getting bigger, I can very easily go and change this to say, give me level 0 and level 1, or maybe even level 2. And I want to make all of those never shared and anything above that dynamic. So it's very easy to go in here when you have control to change these things, especially in an environment where if you're dependent on somebody else, if you don't have DRM or something like that, where it's easier to manage, you can manage a lot of these things inside of a calculation. So that's the calc. I mean, it's word wrapped, right? But I mean, it's probably, I don't know, 10 lines, and I can take this anywhere I go. So 10 lines, and I can manage very easily what's dynamic and what's not in my application. Outline builds from Best Buy. So again, I'm not going to go through this line by line, but what I want you guys to take from this is I've got a screenshot over to the right of a list of at least a part of the hierarchy that has every Best Buy store, what city it is in, what state it's in, and then I divided them up into logical divisions and regions. So I can at any point go out and run this calculation. Oops, sorry about that. And guys, this is the calculation. It goes from 14 to 59, and I formatted it. Goodness, sorry. I formatted it to make it pretty readable, but I could even make this even smaller if I wanted to. But 14 to 58, if I do the math, that's 44 lines. You can see that I'm going out, I'm requesting the data from the Best Buy website. And what gets returned to me, all I'm doing is looping through all of the elements or all of the lists. Think about it as a relational request, all of the records. And I've got fields in here like region, city, store ID, long name, which equates to city, state, the store member name, and then the alias. So this right here goes out to Best Buy and refreshes my demo app whenever I want. And it takes, the first time, because there were a lot of members, it took a little bit of time. But when I run it now, it usually takes about 30 seconds. And then I refresh my app. So again, the benefit of this, think about it. I don't have to get files anymore. If you can pull this stuff from a REST-enabled source, you could even, query another planning application to sync your cubes if they had the same metadata. So you'd only have to update one environment, and every other environment would just query that one and then update that, update from that environment through the REST API and Groovy. So, I really want you guys to get excited and to start thinking about all of the things that maybe you hadn't thought about. And hopefully this inspires you to think about some things that you haven't done before. So moving automation to business rules. And I've talked about this. They're easier to build. They're faster to replicate. There's less dependency on a remote server. You can access it from anywhere. So if there's a problem, you don't have to VPN in. You can just log in through the cloud and you can fix your problems. The logging is a lot more transparent for the application owners because I can put to the job console anything I want. Again, same kind of stuff here. Fewer scripting languages to know, easier to error trap and troubleshoot, less requirement for a test and a prod automation servers. That can get confusing sometimes. Executing data management. If you didn't think about this, you can execute data management on form save, which is something that we haven't been able to do in the past. You can pass the point of view and you can dynamically run data management processes based on the point of view. So you can really isolate those data management processes, whether it's pulling data out of your cube and pushing it to another cube, whatever it might be. So again, one, it's user enabled. There's no special security required. You can dynamically pass the point of view, and all of the data management functionality now exists in a calculation. You can read the logs in React, so you can get the data management logs, which are pretty detailed. And you can, again, if there's a member that doesn't exist, you can add the member, do a refresh, and then run the process again. So again, eliminate user requests, which is great. Admins don't have to do a lot of this stuff, or power users don't have to do it. You don't have to train anybody on how to go into data management and run these processes, like with the locations, and explain all of that. So a lot easier. This is something that's relatively new, and this is going to hit home to a lot of people. Think about all the times that you wanted to do inverse logic, meaning if you had units and you had sales and you had like unit price. And people wanted to be able to enter in either the unit price or the units or the total sales and back into the other one. If they wanted to enter into the dynamic calculation, like the sales price, like unit sales price, which was typically just your units divided by your total sales, we had to create another kind of fake member, right? A memo or some other type of a dummy member to hold that information. You don't have to do that anymore. So when the form loads, you can actually say, you know what? I know it's dynamic, but I want somebody to be able to update that value. And then when they save that form, if they update a rate, you can say, okay, I can't save the rate back to the database because that's going to do nothing. So what am I going to do? I'm going to back calc one of the other metrics. And there can be rules. You can right click and lock one and it calcs the other one, for example. So if I put in a rate and I wanted to hold units, I could right click and lock units so that it would impact the sales. If I wanted to keep my sales the same, then I could right click and lock sales, change my rate, and it would impact the units. So all of that stuff is possible. So there's a whole new world opened up that we can do, what we can do for clients and users that we've never been able to do before. And again, this holds to any dimension. So period accounts, hybrid. So if you have a hybrid app and somebody wants to load to a parent and it's sparse or dynamic, then you can open that up and then do something with it before it gets back to the database so that it actually allocates all the way down. And you don't have to store members just to have them inputable. So top-down planning, inverse logic, I talked about that. Again, just more of the same. Eliminates the need to blow up your database with a bunch of members that you don't need. Better database size, improves performance. There's a lot more logic that the users can actually request that we can build now. So here's an example of this. No surprise here, but I've got average price per case, net revenue, and regular cases. So the average price per case in this situation is a dynamic calculation that takes cases divided by revenue to get my average price. So if I save this form and I update this, I get 2.5 and 2.8. It's, again, a dynamic calc. It automatically returns. But what I've done on save is that I've enabled the person to enter that value. So see, I locked cases and I changed the rate. So you see the rate stayed at 4, the cases remained at 2,500, but the revenue went up to 10,000. If I would have locked revenue at 10,000 and changed my average price per case, then my regular cases, my units would have changed. So think about all the times that people have asked for that and how frustrating it's been to either have to build the logic that kind of goes halfway to what they want or say, no, we don't have to do that anymore. Exporting user-defined data to the inbox. I'm not going to spend a bunch of time on this, but we have the ability to basically create a grid with data and it exports to the inbox. So if you ever wanted to export specific data to the inbox and get it, I mean, obviously we can do it with, with the inherent functionality and planning. We can do it with calculations, but this will give you the option to dynamically name the name, have a user be able to enable or to request that, export. So a little bit different. AS only applications. It used to be very difficult to create applications. I've created supply chain applications and for some of the biggest companies in the world in ASO with no Essbase calculation at all. So we used to be stuck with very simple math. You can do anything now, balance walk forwards, allocations, anything. And it is super fast. It's a lot faster than what you guys would think. So enter at parents, like all of the stuff that we could never do with ASO, we can now do. So is ASO better than hybrid? I don't know. I think there's still a place for both. I think hybrid's still growing and it's still improving and it's not to ASO yet. So there is a reason that you might want to go with one over the other. What if planning? Think about this, guys. This is something that was very difficult to do. You had to copy version scenarios, that kind of thing. So here's an example that I'll show you that I implemented just recently that walks through this. So if you look at this, I am at a parent. So I'm at total department. So I'm at total department and I'm at actually a state. And I go in and I change these values. This, if you think about it, calculates at one block. So it calculates total department and then Ohio stores. So that was very quick. It didn't allocate it down to everything. And it stores it in a temporary version. So now I can look at my revenue and say, great, I like it or I don't like it. If I don't like it, I can right click or use an action menu and say, I want to revert all the accounts back to what they were before. Hello, undo, right? We've never really had that before. So it goes right back to what it was before. Let's say I change those a little bit. I like the results and I want to commit it. I hit save and it saves it kind of, I want to say in memory, but that's really a lie. It's not in memory. It saves it to, like I said, a different member and a dimension, a different version, something temporarily. And if I like what the results are given, so I like my total calculated revenue in this case, I can apply it. So here I commit it. And what this does is the full allocation all the way down to your lower level stores and lower level departments. And then it rolls it back up and it effectively is the same number. But the speed is way better. and the ability to basically be able to do a what if in your application without sandboxing, without copying to a different version. You have every function that you had, all the math, everything, and you can say, I like it, I don't like it, I can commit it, or I can just go and cancel it. So hopefully you're excited and you can see, holy crap, there are some really powerful things that we can do. So before I let you go, real quick, Groovy is open source. Planning is built with Groovy, so it's not going anywhere. Just in case you thought it was a fad, it's not. Oracle exposes Groovy for us to use now, which is awesome. You've got the REST API. So those are basically the two components that I talked about today, Groovy and then the REST API. Also the EPM planning API, which is the API that they built in the cloud that they exposed to us. So there's kind of three different pieces. If you want to get to know this more, I have, I think, almost 60 blogs now on different examples with Groovy. So you can always go to Into Hyperion and you can read. You can also go to podia.intohyperion.com. Podia is an educational site where you can produce online classes, basically. And I have produced a number of classes, and I'm always working on more. And you can go out there and purchase these classes. There are a couple for free, and you can get your feet wet. If you like it and you want to buy one, you can buy one. The REST API source, you can Google this, but the two places that you're going to want to get very familiar with are the REST API and the Groovy docs, which, again, Google it or download this presentation later. And if you guys want to buy something for the rest of this week, I'm offering 15% off. So here's the link. I will, I think, leave this up here while I ask questions or go back to it. There's also a short link. So it's bit.ly and then Hyperion Solutions 2020. It'll take you to the same place. Again, you can try before you buy. There's some free stuff out there. And one note, if you buy the REST class right now, it's not finished yet. It is one of the reasons I'm discounting this. I hope to have it done in December. And by the end of this month, I'll probably have 3 of the 5, if not 4 of the 5 modules done. Current curriculum, I've got some sample trading. I've got how to read the Java docs, which is a great class, and it's super cheap for 99 bucks. I wish I would have had it. And basically, just to give you guys an idea, I basically built these like if I wanted somebody to train me as a finance person how to learn this stuff without being, you know, a professional, you know, educated coder, this is kind of how I've laid this stuff out. So I've got stuff on the Java docs. I've got stuff on just the EPM cloud in general. That's the biggest one. And I also have the REST API class. So I'm going to go ahead and put the links back up there. And I think we're ready for questions. So I'm assuming I will open up the Q&A. Okay. Is all of this covered in your training? I would say 99% of it is, yes. And, you know, one of the nice things about the training is I kind of teach you guys to not just be able to do function A, function B, function C, but it's kind of the analogy, what is it, you know, teach a man to fish and he'll feed himself for a lifetime. That's really what I'm trying to do.
We've got another question that came in through the chat from Megan. It says, would all of those features be custom logic using Groovy, or are there templates available?
There are no templates available. So yeah, it would all be custom. Yeah, it would all be custom, I would say. I'm trying to be careful how to answer that. I mean, there isn't like you have in the GUI where you can, you know, like drop the, I don't know, that one object that will allow you to identify the set statements. So there's nothing like that.
Any other questions for Kyle? All right, Kyle, we are ready for your wrap up or goodbyes.
Okay, well, thanks, guys. Thanks for participating. And thanks, NRL and Edward, and probably less Edward and everybody else that did all the work. But thanks for doing this. I be honest, these conferences I miss so much, and obviously virtual is not the same thing, but I can't tell you the friendships that I've built and the satisfaction I have gotten out of, sharing my knowledge, and then just the vast amount of things that I learned from other people is incredible in these conferences. So I'm glad you guys participated, and thanks to NRL for somehow pulling this off. So congratulations.